As you can see, I couldn't help myself. This engine had a rattly noise at an idle. I've heard gobs of other ITs on the internet, on YouTube. They all have that idle, rattle. Sounds like ticking noise. Couldn't help myself. I had to take the top of the motor off. Good thing I did though. Top end is wiped. So it's already a first oversized piston. This is what we're dealing with. Don't know if I'll be able to get a good shot of this. Hang on. See if I can get you set here for a second. Get my fingers in there. There we go. That piston shouldn't rock like that. Way too much play in there. Way too much bore gap. Allowed 2 to 2.5 thou. It's got about 30. That's a rattle. So, looks like I gotta order a piston. And get it bored out. It's already been bored once. Like I said, it's already first oversize. Now it's got to go to the second oversize. Wiseco has piston sets from the supplier here. They're 175 plus taxes. So we'll just throw another couple hundred at it, I guess. Other than that, everything else is good. The wrist pin's fine, the upper bearing's fine. Connecting rod's fine. The crankshaft's fine. So that's where we're at. Yeah. Shouldn't move like that. Alright, so the top end's off the motor. We're going to use this bore mic here. I'm going to check the bore size. I'm going to use verniers to check that. I'll use also the verniers to check the piston. We're going to find out what our piston to bore clearance is. And it's going to tell me, well, it's going to tell me it's worn out, but I already know that. But it's going to tell me how bad we're at. So these are spring loaded either side. This knob on the end tightens them, so when they're in position, you snug the knob and it stays in that position. That lets you take it out of the bore, measure it. There are other versions of this type of tool that has a dial indicator on the end. So you would put it in there and you would rock it back and forth in the bore. One end is fixed and this end, one end would move. And you rock it back and forth and there's a dial on the end that would actually rotate and shows you exactly what the readings are. But this works for the amount of time that I need them. This works just fine. So I'm going to get it set in there as deep as I can without hitting the ports. And it has to be perpendicular to get your accurate reading. So you just rock it back and forth gently over the center. Gently snugging the handle as you do it. Until it comes to a lock. It's just a slight amount of drag. Okay, so that's roughly where it needs to be. Check our vernier here. You guys are probably seeing this sideways. Yeah. Anyways, you can read it. Zero it out. Let's check, see what we got. .621. I'm gonna pop that in my calculator here. 2.6. That's not 6. 621. And we're gonna subtract the size of the piston, and that'll tell us what the clearance is. Piston's supposed to be measured about 10 millimeters up from the skirt, the bottom of the skirt, and 90 degrees perpendicular to the pin. Well, it has to be because you can't measure it in line with the pin. But let's make sure this is zeroed again. Let's check our skirt. There's a little bit of a scraping here. on the piston, so I'm just going to offset it just a little bit from 90 degrees to make sure we get an accurate reading. Because if that scrape part is raised, then it'll give us a larger size than what we actually have. We're about 3/8 from the base. Actually, spec is 10 millimeters, but 3/8 is good enough for us. So let's say 2.6. Oh, we're in the port here. 2.601. There you go. The glare's gone. 2.601 minus 2.601 equals 0.02. So that's 20 thou. It would be typically would read 0.020, but 20 thou. Going by specs, that bore clearance is allowed to be 2 to 2.5 thou. We are 18 thou too big. That's why that piston is slapping back and forth in there. And that's why it's banging and rattling and carrying on. So, we are way out of spec here. Way out of spec. Put that in perspective. Let's get this back to where it was. 2.621 roughly. We'll lock that down. Flip it over to millimeters. No. 2.621. Seems I can't even read a digital one. I'm going to get it pretty close here, as close as I can. 2.621. Now we'll lock it down. Flip it over to millimeters. So that's 66.58 millimeters. That's our bore. The original size for this engine would have been 66 millimeters. Even the bore size. We know by this marking on the piston. Let's see if I can get it so you can see it. That 5.0 tells me that it's a 0.5 millimeter oversize already. So the bore should be 66.50. And it's 0.59. So the bore is worn. I'm hoping I can get this changed up to the 1 millimeter oversize. It'll make it 67 even. Hopefully there's enough, it's straight enough and there's not too much of a taper or anything that I can go to exactly a 67-inch bore. That would be the second oversize, is 1 millimeter oversize bore. I've ordered the piston. It's got to go, once I get the piston and the ring set, I will take the piston, the ring set, and the jug to the machine shop and have them bore it out. You can do the boring and the final honing, and I'm really hoping I can get away with 67 millimeter. I can go another size over, but I've already ordered the 67 millimeter piston. So once the parts come in, everything goes off to the machine shop. Once I get it back, I will fire up the vid camera again, and we'll get this fired back together. I had to take it apart. If I hadn't taken it apart, it would have let go and would have destroyed a bunch more than it already has. So it is what it is. Old bikes need work. So my reeds had to come out again. Alright, we'll get it fired up when I get the parts and everything back from the machine shop. Okay, the day has arrived. We got our stuff back from the machine shop. It's been a while. That machine shop is the closest one to me, and it's 40 minutes away, and he's extremely busy. There's not many engine machine shops around anymore. There's a CNC, there's a machine shop in my small town, but they do CNC work. They don't do any engine work at all. So I took it out to another guy, and I've never used this machine shop before. Super nice guy. We're gonna check out, see what the bore looked. Oh, I've already measured it, but we're gonna go through it here. Bore looks great. Looks good. It's got the right crosshatch in it. I've reached in and checked the ports. The ports got a nice chamfer on them. They're a little overdone. He didn't do that though. because I asked him specifically about it, if he chamfered the ports, because if he hadn't have done it, I would have done it myself. So, back in the earlier video, we had about 0.4 millimeters available material to take out, which is not a lot, in order to make it to the next size 67 millimeter bore, because that's the piston I bought. I mean, worst comes to worst, it wouldn't have cleaned up, and we would have had to go to 67.5, and I would have just had to buy another piston and try and recoup my money on the old new one, but the 1 millimeter oversize. But luckily he managed to get it. He goes, I asked him about the wear pattern. He says all he did was he set the boring bar to what it should be, and he just ran it. He goes, but I'll tell you, he goes, it wasn't cutting very much. So it cut a little bit of material off, and he ran his hone through it, cleaned it up real nice. So I did go ahead and measure that. I used my telescopic gauge again, and I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole of measuring it again. But anyways, this is basically the idea of it. You set it. Let's see how the camera looks there. Okay, so you set it base. Ooh, don't do that. Easy now. You basically set it so it's a little canted this way. So instead of being perfectly straight in the bore, you want it to be a little bit offset. We're going to measure it this way though. A little bit offset to one side. And you snug the thimble up on the back here, and it puts some tension on these pins here. And then at that point, you tip the gauge, and by tipping the gauge, it's going to push these plungers in, and they're still held by tension, so you can't crank on it, but it's got to be snug enough that when you do remove it from the board, they remain inside. But it's just enough that it holds these plungers, and I use my digital calipers here, which I consider to be accurate within a thou. I mean, within a thou is good enough. It's just because I don't have a micrometer. Actually, I should be using a 2 to 3 micrometer, the C-clamp looking one. I just don't have one here, so I measured it. It is right on the money at 67 millimeters. It is perfect. It's exactly what it should be. He hit his mark, and I'm happy for that. So I did the same thing, calipers on the piston, and it's showing me 0.003 of an inch clearance. I'm going to consider that plus or minus. Actually, what was it? It was actually measuring 2 thou clearance. I'm going to consider that around right, because it's vernier calipers. It's not a micrometer, so I'm going to say it's going to be fine. I'll tell you, that piston fits in there much better now, much better. Matter of fact, I've already done this. I flipped it over on the paper towel, so there's no head gasket on the other side of this. I flipped it over on the paper towel, and this being the front, there's my arrow pointing to the front. I got the piston in here. There's hardly any movement there at all. The piston doesn't travel that far down, but you get the idea. There's hardly any movement. And when I drop it all the way in, it actually, the compression or the tightness of the board of the piston, that gap is tight enough that it's actually trying to compress air on the way down. It doesn't just fall right through. So that's a good fit. It's a good fit. So our next step is going to be, we're going to measure the ring end gap to make sure that the rings are not, the piston ring has got a gap on it. We're going to make sure that they're not too far apart, which the old ones, I mean, you're going to park the truck in there. They were so far apart. But more importantly, well, also importantly, is if they're too close, when they heat up and expand, the end of the rings will actually I've got a ring right here in my hand. When they heat up and expand, the end of the ring will actually bind. It'll touch, and then it's locked. And at that point, the whole ring will expand bigger and bigger, and it'll jam itself on the bore. So we don't want that. We want to get the piston ring in there. We're going to measure our end gap. The way you do that is quite simple. I've already wiped out the bore with a rag. Get all the stuff out of it. He did wash it nice and clean for me, but I want to make sure that there's no oil or dust or any garbage in there. Set the ring in there. We're going to take the top of our piston and we're going to use that to set the ring in squarely. I'm just going to push it down until I level out one of the ring gaps here. Probably the top one. That should get me sunk in there. Good enough distance. I'm about 3/8 of an inch in there. So now I can see my end gap. Let's see if I can get a shot of it. There we go. There's our ring end gap. And I'm just going to row through the feeler blades here until I find one that's just a drag fit. I don't want to have to jam it in there. I'm going to find one that's going to be a drag, just a slight drag. Let's try a 12. That slides right through. 13 thousandths of an inch, that is. A little bit of a drag. 14 has got a nice friction drag on it. So it's between 13 and, well, about 14 thou. Reading by spec, there is a minimum recommended ring end gap, depending, and it usually goes by the size of the bore. Before we do that, let's just check this one too. We're already here. Let's just check it real quick. Same thing. We'll set that, sink it down in there as even as we can eyeball it. I know, real technical. Let's try our. We'll go right to 13. You can't see me what I'm doing, but I'm just sliding this feeler blade into the gap and just seeing if there's a drag on it. So I felt it touching on the 13. And nice drag on 14. Perfect. I'm happy with that. That is golden. We're going to go with it. But in order to tell you how I determine if that's good or not, it's recommended by Wiseco, who supplied the rings and the piston, that there's a minimum piston ring end gap. And that's not on this, it's on the ring one. Reading on the paper here, blah blah blah. Minimum recommended end gap is usually 4 thousandths of an inch per inch of bore. For example, a gap for a 3-inch bore would be 12 thousandths. So 4 thousandths of an inch per every inch of bore. 4 times 3 is 12,000. So that's a minimum. Let's see what we got. We don't need to be very accurate with this. We're measuring in inches. I could use a tape measure, but just for numbers. Should be around 2.6. Oh, there we go. 2.632. That is not an accurate measurement. 2.632. I hate having the camera overhead. 2.632 times 0.004 equals, we need to have a minimum of 10 thousandths of an inch. We have the minimum and a little bit extra. We're good. So that's that. All boils down to the bore is perfect. The piston to bore clearance is right in spec. The ring end gap is right in spec. It's all going to come together. These are the circlips that you use to hold the piston pin in. This is the wrist pin. It's the one that goes through the piston here, connects to the connecting rod. The fit of this pin in the piston is very nice. Just a nice, nope, it's got a circlip in it. Very nice. It doesn't go in crooked. If you hold it straight, as soon as you get that straight in there, it just gently slides in. It's just a nice slip fit. The old one was quite a bit looser. And going to the old wrist pin, I can actually see and feel where the bearing had been making a groove in the wrist pin. So there was wear on the old wrist pin. Everything mics out good. I've got one circlip in here now because these Wiseco ones are an animal to get in there. So it makes it easier when it's on the bike. That's the new Wiseco one. That's one of the old ones. That little tab there is real handy to get a pair of needle nose pliers on. Alright, I'm going to get you guys in the stand. I'll get over on the bike and I'll start assembling this animal. Hopefully, we're going to have her blow in smoke today. Stand by. Okay, so we're over on the bike now. What I've got in this bottle is just some 2-stroke oil. I'm going to just dribble some on the big end of the crank there, of the connecting rod. Just give it a little lubrication to start off with. I've got these rags in here. One rag split in half. And the hope is, if I drop something, it's not going to go down the motor. So there's a hole in the top of the connecting rod. Put a couple of drops of oil through that. We're going to fit our wrist pin bearing. Get some oil in there. I ain't afraid of putting a little extra oil in. What's it going to do? Smoke? It's a 2-stroke. It's supposed to. If you got a 2-stroke that doesn't smoke, an old bike like this, you got a problem. Set our piston there. Me being silly, probably should have put my piston rings on first, but doesn't matter. They'll work. Let's get that wrist pin put in there. Nice. Oh, that's a really nice fit. It's a little more snug than when it was on the bench because with just a pin in the piston, because it had to go through the bearing as well, and the bearing took up the space, so there's no play. There's not even any rock in that piston. Wow, a minuscule amount that I could feel. The other one was quite loose, and that would be from that wear I described in the wrist pin. Okay, so now I got to get that circlip in there. Like I was explaining earlier, they're a bit of an animal. In order to get this shot, I've got you guys pretty close, so this little fidgety clip is why I have those paper towels down there. Hopefully I can get that animal in there. Did I bump you? Yeah. You're in my elbow room, that's why. Come on. Just cooperate. Just get in your home. Well, it pays to have strong fingernails. Okay, there we go. Click. I'm going to grab my light here. Yes, circlip is all the way in. Fully in the groove. I already checked the other side. This little notch here. I'll get my light away for a sec. There, that little notch at the top there. That's so you can get a tool in there and pick underneath that clip to get it out. So our piston is installed. Nice. Hardly any rock at all. A little bit of movement in the connecting rod, and that's normal. See, there's a little pin here in this piston ring groove, and there will be one on the top as well, and that locates your piston rings where they need to go. Set that back there. That'll give me a nice room to put my rings on there. Let me grab my piston ring tool. Instructions say it does not matter which way you install these rings. A lot of times there is a top ring and a bottom ring. A lot of times there is an up and a down, usually denoted by a dot or something on the piston ring itself. The instructions on this particular set says don't matter. Do whatever you want. So these are piston ring expanders. They're designed to expand evenly. Just tapered ends, so it doesn't matter really how thick your piston ring is. It fits many. And for some reason, I got like 6 pairs of these things. I don't even know where they all came from. Oh yeah. Actually, I think this set's not quite right. I think this set's a little bent. I'm just gently guiding it. You only want to expand that ring the minimum required to get it over the piston. So that one is, I put the bottom one in first, the locator pin is here, and you can see the, let's get you a background. There you go, you can see that there's notches in the end of that piston ring. And those notches, when they close, go around the pin and prevents the ring from turning on the piston. I just don't know where the pin is for the top one, I didn't look for it. Found it, it's over there. I can feel it with my fingernail. I'm gonna go on the other side there and see if I can get that on. I'm gonna grab the other expanders too. That's better. These are a little looser and straighter. They're not trying to hold the piston ring crooked. So we're just going to expand it the minimum required to get it onto that piston. Slipped out at the last second, that's fine. We'll just walk it down over there gently. There we go, the top ring is in the top groove and lined up on its locating pin. Bottom ring is lined up on its locating pin. Perfect. I'm going to put like a drop of 2-stroke oil on that. Just a drop. Push that one in and get a little drop on the lower ring. There we go. Just to give them a little help. That's set. Get you lined back up on your locating pin. There, both of those rings are on their pins. So what that means is, because those rings are located, you got to be careful when you put the bore on there. Because if those rings if you put the bore on there and move it a little bit, there's a chance it might pop out of that locating pin, and you don't want that. It's got to be in where it's supposed to be. So be very careful when I put that bore on there. So I've got my base gasket on. I put the thinnest of skins of RTV on the engine case before I put the gasket on. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put just a skin of RTV on the jug. And then when I set everything together, we should be alright. So I'll hang on. I got to get a couple of dowel pins in that cylinder head, and then we'll come back with the jug. Sorry, not cylinder head. I got to put dowels in the cylinder. Hang on. Okay, so while I was over on the bench getting the RTV on the cylinder, I realized that I also needed to put the head studs in because I took them out to go to the machine shop. So put the studs in there, got my dowels, the locating dowels in there. I'm going to try and do this from this side so you guys can see what's going on. It's a bit of a tight fit with the studs in there. I suppose I could have put them on after, but whatever. They come off with the studs on, so it'll fit. It's a matter of holding everything together. Let's get our piston kind of aligned where it needs to go. I'm going to use a gentle rocking motion to get that piston to seat. I get the rings to squish, get the bore to go in. It's hard to see everything at the same time. I think I might have a ring that's not lined up because it's not wanting to go on. They're on their locators. There we go. Gently now. There we are. Okay, before I jam everything down here, let's get that rag out of there. do is I'll just rotate the engine, get the piston to come up a little. All right. Whoa. So, let's get that set back over its stud. At the same time, it's going to push the piston up into the bore, which it did. Make sure my arrow is facing the front. The arrow on the piston has to face the front, which it is. Head looks like it's sitting down nice and flat. So there's 4 nuts to hold that down. I'm not going to go through every little step of this, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just nuts and bolts. But I'll get you a nice shot of the shiny bore and the shiny piston. Might be easy to get you out of the stand and bring you over here. Might be able to get it from there. Oh, it's perfect. Nice shot from here. Let's get you out of there. Cool. Sorry, dizzy. Well, there we go. When I was talking about chamfering ports, these are your ports. Intake, exhaust, and the tops and bottoms of these ports can't be sharp. They have to be chamfered so the rings are able to pass by them and not actually hook them and grab. So that's that. I'm gonna get you guys out of my way. I'll get some nuts and bolts on there. I'll bring you back in a few minutes. Alright guys, I went ahead and put everything back together. You've seen me take this carburetor and all that, the boot and everything off. I had the reeds off before in a previous video. If you missed it, make sure you check out my channel, check out the rest of the videos that I've got up there. I've got one where I was dealing with the reed valve and the cage that was in there. These are new Boyson reeds in there. So I got these cylinder nuts torqued down 26 foot-pounds. That's what the specs call for. Got my copper head gasket in there. 5 nuts on the top, 26 foot-pounds. And I went ahead and just put everything back together. So the carburetor's back on there. The spark plug's in, wires on, the exhaust is on. It's all together. It's basically ready to splash some gas in it and give her a test fire and see what happens. Now you should break these things in, so I'm going to do a couple of heat cycles. I'm not going to ride it. I'm going to run it, idle it, you know, give it a little bit of throttle, crack it up and down a little bit, but I'm not going to load it. I'm just going to let it warm up pretty warm, and then I'll shut it off and just let it cool. Do that a couple of times, and then you go out and you do some riding. Basically, you don't beat the hell out of it. You just do some riding. Change gears, rev it up a little bit, change gears. You don't want to lug the engine. You don't want extended wide open periods. But that's that. I mean, it basically from the last little section of video here until this point, it's been like 20 minutes. Basically, just dropping everything together. It's that simple. So that's that. If you're interested in this bike and you haven't seen it yet, like I said, check out my playlists or check out my other videos. I've got a few of them where I've gone over this bike from when I purchased it and where it is now. New decals, new tank, new stuff, things. Did a Speedo hub repair. Got that working again. So anyways, I'm going to cut this video off here, guys. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to I might add some video on the end of this when it's running. I want to hear what it sounds like, and we'll see what goes from there. It's blowing smoke, and the noise is gone, completely gone. Noticeably more compression. Throttle response is a lot better than it used to be. Even kick-starting it, I can tell it's going bump, 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 bump as I was kicking it. Runs great. Wasn't like that before. What a difference. What a difference. It's only got a splash of gas in there. It might actually run out. Idle's good. It's smoky, but it's supposed to be. It's a 32-to-1 mix of this one, which is pretty rich. I like it. It sounds so good. That rattle is gone. Excellent. Excellent. Alright, I'm not going to rev it up too much more. The neighbor's going to get upset. Just going to let it warm up, and then I'll just stop it, let it cool down on its own. That's getting pretty warm up there now. You can hear that rattle that you can hear now is in the clutch. That's a clutch rattle. It's not the high frequency ticking noise that was up in the top end before. Alright guys, that'll wrap this video up. We're got it running, runs good, sounds good. It's going to be fun on the trails this coming season, and I'm real happy. I'm happy that the noise is gone. It's got a nice crisp throttle response now. The new reeds helped with that, and the compression helped with that, so it runs top notch. So the last thing to do is I did 2 heat cycles on it, so I fired it up, let it warm up, revving it just a little bit here and there, and it'll be fine. It's not under load or anything. I did 2 heat cycles where I fired it up, let it warm up to operating temperature, pretty warm, and then I would shut it off and let it cool. The next day I did it again, shut it off, let it cool. So the next time is basically you go for a ride. Go out, shift through the gears, put a little bit of load on it. No wide open throttle, crazy stuff. No racing. Just a little bit of varying throttle. Varying loads. You don't want to idle it too long, you don't want to rev it up too long, no steady speeds, and then after that heat cycle cools right down to cold again, then we should be good to go. Going to be probably a small change in the carburetor jetting. Not so much the jetting, just the adjustment. The pilot screw will have to be adjusted to make sure that everything's working the way it should go. So thanks for joining me. I know there's been a lot of videos on this bike. I'm excited about it. It's what I've been doing in the shop. There hasn't been, I mean, we're just coming out of winter now. It's just the first week of April, right at the time of this recording, 2020, in the midst of the Corona thing. So I've been staying at home and doing a lot of this stuff. Keep myself busy. But I got a busy day today. I've got more things on the go, so I'm going to wrap this video up, and then I'll refire the camera up and I'll shoot some more video, because I got a few things I got to work on today. Till the next video, don't forget to subscribe. I always forget. It's this one, right here. There should be a button right there, little square thing. It says subscribe. Go ahead and click on that, and don't forget to click the bell icon. It'll let you know when I upload new videos. And get some great new content. Thanks guys, till the next one, take care.